All right, thank you for having me, everybody. Just as a reminder, this is a four-part series. So we are going to essentially crawl and then start to walk and start to run. The first one is branding, where we're going to talk about the ins and outs and the nuances of brands. That's going to build upon itself next week when we start to talk about web development, SEO, pay-per-click, and ancillary marketing. And then the final part of the lecture series, which is week 4, where we're going to go over all the ins and outs of Google Analytics, tracking, digital tracking, and then some questions you guys might have. We'll do some workshopping to look at your brand, look under the hood and see what's going on there, if there's any improvements we can make, etc. So this is the beginning. This is part 1. This is branding. Okay, so what is a brand essentially? A lot of people see a brand and they think a logo mark, right? It's just a simple logo on a business card. That's my brand. But that's true. But there's a lot more to it than just your logo mark. You have the full aesthetics of your brand, right? The colors, the way you use and treat imagery, the typography you use. I see a lot of scatteredness throughout both digital and tangible print materials where people use random typefaces, etc. And then it's your messaging, who you are, what you're about, what's your tone, what's your voice, what is your tagline or your mission statement, which we'll get into. These things are going to be important, all bring together the personality of what your brand is and who it is in the market space. Once you know that and you have a firm grasp on that, similar to knowing who you are as an adult, right? Once you have a firm grasp on that, then you'll be able to own and dominate where you are in the market space. So it all starts here with the brand, and that's why we're starting here in this position. So we're starting with the brand identity, right? So we did talk about logos, but what's my behavior? What are some of the things I say and do? How do I feel? The language. Now that language could be both visual, which I could be cueing for color, right? Like I could say every time I'm showcasing my product, or as a web example, which we're going to get into in the subsequent meeting, I'm always making my buttons on my website orange, right? Every time you contact me or click on something, that button is always the same color. So what is my language, both visual and cues and in copy and content? The mission, what is my mission statement? Why am I here? What am I about? What am I doing? Who am I targeting? And what's my core values? The vision. So the overall vision of my brand strategy, where I see myself 6 months from now, 6 years from now, etc. That's my overall vision. Then the culture. The culture is rather important. The culture is important internally, of course, for your employee development, but the culture is important externally as well. Am I a fun, playful brand? Am I a serious, corporate entity? Am I an investment bank where certain colors and tones and temperament is important to build trust in business? Or am I a kids brand and trying to be fun and airy and playful and light? So being able to build those things and understand those are going to be helpful. Your design overall, which again, that's everything from your logo onwards to the way you present yourself digitally, the way your tangible assets look, like your trifolds, your brochures, your business cards, etc. All that stuff is going to cohesively come together. And finally, your communication. How do you communicate to the world? What are some of the things you say? Do you have a vernacular that's hip and fun and playful? Do you say modern words that are common with a younger audience, or do you use enhanced vocabulary because you're speaking to a B2B clientele, a business to business clientele, and you have a more advanced audience? So starting to understand, know all these things will start to equal your brand identity over time. Now, back in the day, things used to be a lot different before the advent of the internet, of course. Now, again, we're very simplistic here in our execution where we're starting, but this is going to start to pick up rather quickly. But in the beginning, we had what we call tangible design, right? So here I'm showing you a picture of a newsstand, right, versus digital marketing. Now, there's a lot of factors that tie into tangible marketing, as I call it, versus digital marketing. Back then, you would pay, let's say, $2,000. You would get a business card sized ad in the local penny saver or newspaper. That newspaper would then, they would say there's a 50,000 piece circulation. 10,000 of those would sit in the corner gathering dust at the local pizza shop. So you don't really have a true understanding of ROI, return on investment, for a lot of that marketing. The good news now is with digital marketing, and as we move into our subsequent meetings, this is going to start to become more and more important, and you'll understand why later down the road. But being able to track these elements, being able to ascertain and understand every dollar out, how much you're getting back in, is king when it comes to digital marketing. I'm going to know how many people clicked, how many people called, how many people converted, and where did they come from? Did they come from a pay-per-click advertisement? Did they go direct to my www.com? Did they visit organically? They were searching for something organically. They were like, pizzerias near me, and then the pizzeria, your pizzeria came up. So these things are going to be vital for tracking purposes as you start to build your digital presentation. Now, when it comes to tangibility, you want to carry that throughout. So you're going to have business cards, trifolds, letterheads. You might put a billboard out. You might do some other, tangible marketing, like we described the little business card size insert in a magazine or newspaper. You might do EDDM, which is every door direct mail. That stuff all needs to tie back in digitally. So everything needs to be cohesive and fluid throughout. I do find when you're working with multiple vendors or multiple partners, let's say you have a team that handles your digital presence, your website, your email marketing, etc., versus then you have a graphic designer on site or something like that that handles your tangible assets. Sometimes there's a lack of cohesion with these things. And that's the first step in missed opportunity in terms of brand voice and brand messaging. So that's why I'm noting that here. Everything needs to cohesively speak regardless of what landscape it sits on. Now, let's start to talk about fun brand things here, starting with color. Okay, so different colors are noted and used in brands and logo marks for various reasons. They want you to feel something, right? So let's take the first one, yellow, for example. Optimism. They want you to feel warm, excited. They want to build excitement and they want to stand out. Vibrant yellows and colors. Something like Best Buy, Hertz Enterprise, Nikon. They're all using this to feel warm. They're using this to stand out against their competition, who might use ancillary other colors. Friendly. So friendly is, you see this with a lot of kid brands. You see this with a lot of edgier brands, but they'll go and use orange. Nickelodeon, good example for kids, right? Fanta Soda, they want to feel fun and playful, right, in the market space. Crush, I mean, both these are also reminiscent of the product that they represent, right? Harley Davidson has their special orange that they use. Hooters, again, same thing. So they want to feel friendly, they have confidence in the market space, and playful. These are a lot of kid brands. Excitement, youthful, and bold for red. So these are ones that want to pop out and be jarring to an extent. A lot of them feel classy and they're anchored more. So you have older brands like Coca-Cola, Nintendo, and Kellogg's. But you're starting to see some newer brands also use some of those reds, and so on. You have the green that feels peaceful. This is more earthy tones. So if I am a dentist office, I'm probably not going to want to use green in my logo mark, right? I'm probably going to go more for blues, a blue tone. So I'm showing trust and confidence, or grays, for example. So choosing the proper color tone for your logo mark is going to be vital in conveying a certain message to a consumer. It's not something that they're going to see and they're going to recognize right away, but it's something that subconsciously they're going to start to understand, because the market space kind of dictates and drives people towards those words, right? Everyone knows that some of those orange ones feel friendly and playful. So just keep in mind, start to look at that stuff, as you're going through, as you're shopping, or as you're looking on the internet, you're looking at other brands, start to see what colors they're using. This shouldn't be something that's done in a vacuum or done inorganically, where you're just making decisions without checking and making sure that this is right for your brand and who you are and where you want to exist in the market space. The other thing I'll say as we start to go and we dive into some of this design ethos is make sure that you have first defined some of these things, who you are, what you're about, who's your target audience, before you start to get into some of this design, to get in the weeds of design. I find that's the biggest mistake you could possibly make. Now, taking the colors, for example, for us, Active Web Group, I love using us as an example, right? Trial by fire here. But Active Web Group, for example, this is our current website. This is the front page above the fold of our website. We're going to start talking about web elements and web design later down the chute, but this is anything that happens above the fold before you scroll down on the website, right? So here we have our hero image, which is that full service digital marketing agency piece right there. We have our contact capture above the fold. It's important to have multiple CTAs or call to actions on your site above and below the fold. You want to make sure people have the most opportune time to convert. Again, this will be something we do a little housekeeping when we're talking about web design. But as you see, one, we have the rule of thirds going on. So you have that dot in the active web group, the request a quote, and then that leads your eye down visually to the connect with us, right? That's not done mistakenly. That's done with intent and on purpose. We're trying to guide the user through a journey. We're using color to kind of play into that. Also, every time you see a call to action or a CTA, it's orange, as I said previously. So being able to take and pull colors from your brand vernacular and sprinkle it into your tangible or intangible, your digital assets, it's going to be very important in telling your user journey cohesively, your brand story. Now, and as I said, using color, highlighting color is going to be a key role in this. Now let's talk typography. And typography is one of the biggest misses in all of design and all of branding. So there are essentially three families of typefaces. You have your serif fonts or typefaces. These are the ones with brackets or feet. A lot of these serif faces like Times or Microsoft has Times New Roman, which is a version of London Times. These are ones that kind of, they lend themselves more to the headline. You don't see too much serif used in body copy. That's because it becomes difficult to read. Then you have your sans serif typefaces. Sans serif typefaces are traditionally used. They're used in body copy. They can be used in bold headline copy. They're more modern-esque. You know, take a Helvetica, for example. That's a sans serif, or a Futura. So they're more modern in their approach. They can feel more airy. And they lend themselves more to longer readability. So you get less fatigue when you're scrolling and reading down the page when you have a sans serif typeface. Then finally, you have decorative typefaces, which they can be good or bad, depending on where you're getting these. You know, you go to defont.com or somewhere free. They might have a plethora of typefaces to choose from, right? But not all are created equal, right? Some typefaces might have different X heights. So an X height is where you have the E or an X, right? That center mark where the two X's connect is called your X height. Now, the modern type design dictates that your X height determines some of your other pieces of type, some of your other letter forms. So the X will be the same size as the E and so forth. Your middle of your X will kind of be where some of the other marks are, like an uppercase E over here will be the middle stroke of that X height. So when you have a typeface that's done amateur-esque on some of these free font places, you're going to find that that's not true, that they don't exactly match up, and that becomes a little jarring to the eye and it feels a little unprofessional. So just keep in mind what you're using, and of course, naturally, you don't want to take a decorative typeface like this and then put it in the body copy of your, you know, or the sub copy. It needs to be used very sparingly. My advice is if you don't understand the rules, don't break them. That's the biggest piece of advice I can give here with this. Now, hierarchy is something used to guide the reader's eye to what's most important. Now, as I said previously when we were looking at the website, but also if you're looking at, you've got a, let's say you're looking at a piece of every door direct mail that you got, right, a postcard. They're going to use hierarchy in that. So you're going to have a headline that's bold, like the word hierarchy, and then you're going to have your sub copy, which is which is smaller, and then after that, you're going to have your body copy. So you want to make sure you're not making everything the same weight and the same size. You also want to make sure that when you're doing that, the most important elements are getting that large hierarchy, right? The title is the most important thing. The call to action, why you're doing this, buy now, save. These things need to be large and in charge. So look at your copy that you have and then make a determination of what's important versus what's least important. Okay, and then that's going to help you determine your hierarchy. Now, other things to note in fonts and typefaces, other rules, you have your kerning, right? The kerning is the way the spacing of letter forms naturally. So as I said, some of those free typefaces, they're going to have very odd kerning. Here you see where you have the R and N, and then you can park a truck in between the N and the I. So that natural kerning of that typeface is bad. right? And you're going to see that in some of those free typefaces or fonts. So you might want to set them manually. And if it's not something you can do, as I said, you don't know how to do that, then don't break those rules and use a typeface that might not really be as professional as the one you should be using. The next to note is the leading. That's the height of the lines in the paragraph, right? If you have a lot of copy, you're going to want to squish those down, but keep in mind that's going to lead to a problem with legibility. So if it's tighter, you don't have a lot of air, a lot of room to breathe, then the person reading it might get fatigued, and they might throw that piece of mail away, or they might not go through all the copy or content that you want them to read on your website. So having enough air and leading in between is going to help legibility and readability. Now, this one is what we call set solid. So this one is set, let's say the typeface is 12, right? Well, this one is double, actually. This is probably set solid. So this one is double. So this is probably 12 on 24. So this has double the height of the font here with your leading. So your typeface is 12, your leading is set 24. This one is probably set 12 on 12, so it only has a single line in between it. Just keep that in mind as you move forward. You don't want, you know, to do 36 or something crazy where it looks like it's a whole different item or element. It's all connected as one paragraph. So there's a fine line there, you know, between airy, being playful, but being a cohesive paragraph structure. And then you're tracking. So you're tracking essentially, if you look, some of these are too tight. You'll see this in newspapers, right? And they'll also use hyphens and things. They'll break some of these rules because they have a lot of content to put on the paper. But this shouldn't be done in like a website context, for example, or this shouldn't be done when you have a brochure or something. You have enough room to play with that and make sure that it's legible. So the tracking here, if you look at my example on number 3 on the left, that it's all tight, right? And you see that I got a whole bunch more letters here than I did over here. This is an example of a paragraph tracked auto, right? This one is tight, so it's minus 100. So I took the natural spacing, the kerning of the letter forms, and I tracked it in to allow for more type. Again, when you see newspapers, this is a traditional example of them tracking things in to allow for more copy. But again, you have to keep in mind that this one over here is a lot harder to read. So this is something I would naturally avoid unless you end up with a widow or an orphan, like you have a ebook ends up by itself on a line. You know, that's a rule I wouldn't break. So I would try to track in some of my type to make up for that. Here's an example of bad kerning. If you go and Google this, you'll see a bunch of silly, fun examples. Some are appropriate, some are not. But this is something you see all the time in signage and things where people don't really understand kerning. But here you have the S, the A, and then there's a giant space in between the V, the I, the N, and G. So just again, when you make signage, when you do things that are going to be not live for that long, or things that actually live for a long time, or things you invest a lot of money in, this is why I'm explaining this. So you have a tangible, you have a physical building and you put your logo there. You just want to make sure that, you know, it's kerned out properly and it's legible, and you don't have anything funny going on like you see here. Now, let's talk about other rules in type that I see broken all the time. Look what I made. So if you look at this, what they're doing is they have what's called a drop shadow, and that's that big shadow behind there, right? And then you have this fun, playful gradient that's going through in a rainbow of colors. Now these rules could be broken. I see this rule again. This would be something I would see Crayola do, minus the drop shadow, right? Avoid drop shadows and outlining type at all costs, right? So if you have a typeface, let's say your background of where you're overlaying the type is black, your type over here, look what I made is, let's say it's like a gray, and then you outline that type so it's visible, or you put some kind of drop shadow or outer glow, which would be white. What that's doing is you created a contrast issue. So your background is black, your copy is gray. This could be done intentionally, but 9 times out of 10 it's intentionally, and people will do things like this. You have a contrast issue. So what you need to do is make that copy, make it white so it's stark and it stands out. Take the background, lighten that background. Do something that affects the color so you have the type stand out, right? Don't do this if you don't have to. This is something that makes it illegible and it makes it look unprofessional. Years and years ago when I was in art school, you would take your work, you'd hang it up on the wall, and you'd stand 10 feet back, right? And you take a look at it and see what do you see? Does the important elements that require hierarchy, are those things standing out? Is the headline standing out, or is the body copy jumping out at you? Is something unimportant that doesn't matter jumping out at you, like some image in the background that doesn't matter, or are you getting the important information first and foremost? So a lot of times when you make decisions like this, it's because you don't really understand the rules there, and you're not really looking at what the most important elements are. We're not creating artwork, right? We're not making a piece that's going to hang up in the MoMA. When you do what we call graphic design here, what you're essentially doing is you're visually communicating. So communication is the key tool. So sometimes less is more. Okay, and that's an important rule in graphic design. Here's a way that it was done a little bit more successfully. So again, you can break the rules and you can put drop shadows and things, but I always say for people, if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to end up doing it like we previously saw, and you're not going to do something a little bit more elegantly like this. But these rules can be broken, and I wanted to show you an example of that. They're using the same color as the background. They're successfully adding a bevel to the type, so it looks like it's sticking out, and then they have a drop shadow, so it looks like it has some 3D element to it. Again, this is done successfully. The previous is done unsuccessfully, and I see the previous a lot more than I see something done successfully. So try to avoid using decorating your typeface as much as possible if you can't follow the rules properly. Now, that carries over into things like buttons digitally, and I'm going to start to impart digital tools here because you know, we're in 2022. People are looking and searching for your brand online, and the majority of this conversation moving forward is going to be about digital stuff. I'm going to talk about SEO, pay-per-click, etc. But I want to start to change up and start to talk about the intangibility, the design digitally. So here, for example, you have two buttons, right? You have a button with a drop shadow. You have a little bit of a drop shadow on the login, and then you have just a simple login button with just a slight little gradient, so it just sticks out just a little bit. The logo, the one on the left, the login, is doing what we call it's vibrating. So because you'll notice that when you look at it, it feels a little jarring. That's because the color of the background along with the drop shadow is very close in tonality to the color of the login button. So this makes it a little jarring. You want to have disruption in design, but you don't want to do something like this. Again, as I said, less is more. So the login button over here on the right hand side is a little bit more successful, and it's probably something that would warrant more clicks. And you say to yourself, Frank, I don't know that would really make a difference. I do A/B testing a lot with a lot of my clients, so I will have a button that's red, and then I'll test it for 2 weeks, see how many clicks it gets, and then I'll work within those same time parameters, and I'll make the button blue, and I'll see if it gets more clicks, right? And I'll measure those metrics over time to see what the best path of conversion color-wise is. It's something silly and it's small, but if it's going to get you 15 to 20% more clicks, people are going to notice that button more. It's going to be an important element that I'm going to want to track and try to A/B test. So again, things like this will help your conversion pathway a little bit more. If things are more readable, it's easy to understand and digest that that's a button, and it's not something that's skipped over when scrolling through the site. Now, the infamous jelly button. These were buttons that were previously used in the approach of the internet. You know, back in the late 90s to early 2000s, everyone would throw every single design trick at the book in terms of creating buttons and headlines and headers and things like that on a website. Don't do these things. That's all I have to say. Don't do these things. One, from a modern standpoint, flat design is still playing a big role. You ask me where design is now, where do I think it's going to be in 5 years? Things are very circular, of course. You know, you talk 10 years ago when 10 years ago when everyone was wearing tight jeans. Now people are wearing more baggier clothes again, right? So things are circular. The same is true in graphic design, web design, etc. Styles do come back over time. You know, we just were in a resurgence of the Art Deco period from the 40s. So here we're looking at a jelly button. This is not something this may come back into play, But from a legibility standpoint, as I said, when thinking about graphic design, we're thinking about legibility. This is not something that's very legible. So again, keep legibility in mind first. Now, let's talk about logos. I'm moving rather quickly here through this on purpose because there's a lot of content to digest. Taking the active web group logo in mind, I have a couple elements here at play. So I have my masthead or my icon. In our case, it's that graph element with our point of interest, our focal point, which is our dot. Then I have our brand name, our name of our company, which is Active Web Group. Then I have our tagline, which is Dynamic Marketing Strategies. Now, all these elements are interchangeable, right? So you could take just the graph element, the masthead icon. I could take that. I like to make that a certain opacity. I'll put it at like 10 to 15%, and that will be in the background of some of my imagery, right? I'll take that orange, I'll pull that orange out, I'll use it for the buttons on my website. I'll take that blue and I'll have certain areas on my website that I break out to show important focal areas, important areas. You know, I'll use it for my, let's say I have a pull quote, which is I'm taking a quote from something a client said and I'm blowing it up so it's nice and big. I'll take that pull quote, that will be in blue. So I'm taking elements from my logo mark and I'm imparting it throughout my my website. It becomes part of my brand guideline. Then you have the name brand, of course, which should be clear and legible. And then you have dynamic marketing strategies, which is the tagline. Now, as you see, I'm not using any decorative typefaces. There's nothing that's got, you know, dots and things in that. I'm not using the outline strokes, drop shadows, anything of that nature. If I'm doing this on, let's say I'm doing this on something that's darker colored, I could take Active Web Group dynamic marketing strategies and make it white. It's part of my brand ethos, so I could do that. And also the other thing to note is I could take I could pull everything apart, as I said. So Active Web Group could live on its own, dynamic marketing strategies, as could the logo mark itself and pieces of that logo mark. So I could take that dot and use that in certain places for interest. So having a modular, as I call it, having a modular logo is going to help you in being successful and being able to, one, strengthen your brand, but use your brand vernacular and your communicating your brand story or your brand message throughout different vehicles, marketing vehicles, like your pay-per-click, your visual display ad, right, or your trifold brochure. So being able to take that stuff and leverage it throughout is going to be important. And the more you have, the better. But again, don't impart too much. You want it to be simple. You want, when I was explaining that you'd put stuff on the wall and you'd stand back, you want your logo to be legible on the postage stamp. You want your logo to be just as legible on the billboard. So when you start to add lipstick to it, you start to add an outline, drop shadow, you have gradient marks and things. It becomes more complex and it becomes more illegible. So less is more in terms of that, flat. Okay, now there are commandments for logo design. I'm going to get into a few of them here. And we've talked about a lot of these over time here already. So again, you want to keep your logo simple. Less is more. Only a couple colors, 1 or 2 typefaces tops. I don't want to see 10 typefaces. I don't want to see anything that's crazy decorative, something that's illegible, because again, it has to live on a postage stamp. Do not add tone to your logo. So adding a tone or a gradient to your logo is going to make it harder for you to render that in various capacities. So let's say you're getting a polos made for your team, and they're doing the embroidery. They're not going to really be able to successfully add tonality to that. So you're going to have places where you can't do that. So if you can't do that sometimes, just don't do it, because you're going to find that you're going to bastardize your brand or your logo mark over time. Don't use rasterized images. So rasterized images are pixelated images. So you have 300 dpi, which is a print ready file. And then you have things that are below that, 72 dpi's for web. A lot of people will take an image, pull it off the web, or go to Google. That becomes part of their brand mark. That's not how it's done. You need a vector icon or vector mark, a .eps file, an SVG for web. You need a file like that you could take and blow it up to be the size of a building, and it looks just as good when it's nice and small on a business card. So you want a vector logo mark as your final output. Your logo should be scalable. We already talked about that. Nice on a postage stamp, nice on a billboard. Don't use too many colors. Talked about that as well. 2 is great. 3 is okay. 4, way too much. So try to have only a few colors that you could then take and fluidly use throughout your brand guideline or your brand strategy. Too many fonts we talked about. I'm not going to get too much deeper into that. We talked about why you don't want to use too many fonts. Do not outline your logo. Talked about that again. If you're outlining something, whether it be an image, a logo, the typeface, it's because you have a contrast issue. Figure out the contrast issue. Change everything to black and white. You know, whenever us at Active Web Group, we start designing logos or we start making tangible assets, 9 times out of 10, we'll make those elements in grayscale, black and white. So the first iteration of the logo marks are black and white. We don't start putting color and playing with color until we have something that's a little bit more definitive. That's done intentionally because we don't want the color to kind of dictate the design. And we don't want things like outlines and adding certain features to it to be an anchor point in what we're creating. Because if you go back to one, when I talked about doing something like embroidering a logo, I don't want that to become a problem for you down the road. So we're eliminating those problems by not factoring them in to begin with. Don't write on your logo, that goes without saying. If you have a container shape, as we call them, in this case, you look at the one for Mobile Ink. The container shape is the iPhone. So they're putting their brand name in that iPhone. You already see the problem here. So it's nice and small. I have no idea what that says. I'm going to pass through it. There's a company that's over here by me, and every time I drive past it, they have a sign that's done in this decorative script font. For the past year, I have no idea who they are, what they do. No, not the slightest idea. And you know, me doing this for a living, it's illegible to me. I can't imagine how many people drive past that sign every day and have no idea what they are. So they're having tons of missed opportunities. So legibility is going to be king and vital. So make sure your brand is legible. Avoid putting a logo in a box. That's the same thing as previous, essentially. You don't want to put your logo mark in a container shape if you don't have to. There are ways to break those rules, like if you want something to feel like a stamp or something that feels like an official seal. But for the most part, don't put it in a container shape. What that does is that limits your ability to break apart the logo and take your elements and make them modular. So a good example would be on the website, right? So on a desktop computer, we're going to get into this in a subsequent meeting, but on a desktop computer, right, you're looking at the full website, right? That full website showing you the logo that's stacked, like Active Web Group stacked. But then when I'm looking at a mobile device, it becomes adaptive to that device, right? And then instead of stacked, it's doing something else, right? It's going side by side or doing something else, where the logo mark and then you have the type next to it. So if you put your logo in a container shape or in a box, you're not going to be able to break apart your logo and make it conform to the needs of the of its output. And lastly, flat does when you have a flat icon, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be flat visually, like it's 2D. So I was telling you guys about you know, using one or two colors. Here, if you look at the mobile ink, they're using 2 colors. That makes it feel like it's 3-dimensional without using a gradient map or a drop shadow or anything like that. So you can take some of those color elements, those color cues, and use them to visually represent something you're trying to do. Okay, now we talked about logos. This is 2021. We are now getting into 2022, but looking at logo trends from last year and going into this year, essentially. So you're starting to see logos that don't live essentially as one thing or one element, right? We're looking at the HAMB, for example, over to the left. They have different iterations of their logo, right? The typeface essentially is a serif typeface in most iterations of this, and they're using different icon marks. It's flat, it's one color, but visually it sits on different color renderings. It has different iterations of its container shape or lack of a container shape. So they're breaking some rules, but they're doing it successfully. I'm seeing a lot more script stuff, things that feel more flourished and hand done and hand decorated. But the key here is I'm seeing the logos being treated in various ways that are not just one solid logo mark. So people are taking it and they're making it utilitarian for its need or its output. Okay, now other things to consider outside logo marks, taglines, color, are things that we don't necessarily relate to a brand, but they are essentially inherently part of a brand strategy, right? One of the biggest ones, and this is me starting to move more towards ROI marketing, which is where I really essentially live, right? And outside the design aesthetic of stuff. So now starting to crawl into that, and as we do that in subsequent weeks now, putting money into our pockets here as business owners. The first thing I think of when I think of a brand, and I think of a brand digitally, is reputation management, or as we call it, the ORM. So reputation management essentially is how people identify you or feel about you on the web. So for example, you have a Yelp profile, a Google My Business profile. You got 2 stars on Yelp, you're a pizzeria. That's going to kill you when people are searching for you. They might be swayed by some other comments or some other reviews. So being able to manage your reputation, being able to own some of those platforms, like I took ownership of my Yelp profile, I took ownership of my Google My Business profile, it's going to help you be a little bit more successful and being able to garner more reviews and being able to own that story digitally. Again, a lot of my small business owners that I work with, they have a lot of failure and a lot of lack of success here, and a lot of it starts with the reputation management. Before I even went to your website, before I looked at your menu, the first thing I did is Google pizzerias near me. You were the first one that came up, so hats off to you for having solid SEO or solid SEO strategy. But when you came up with 1.5, 2 stars. I saw your competitor had 5 stars or 4.8 stars, and the pizza did look delicious because they had better photos. Is where I'm going to probably get pizza, even though you came up first. So 9 times out of 10, it's going to start with the reputation management. Now, we all know about reviews and how well reviews are received digitally. 72% of consumers on average trust online reviews. 95% of unhappy customers will respond and will return to a place if you respond. So what I'm saying here is that a lot of my small business owners, they'll just let these review boards run wild with negative reviews. The first in the strategy is, if you have a bunch of negative reviews, is you want to take ownership of that profile and you want to start to comment on those reviews. And you don't want to comment from a negative space. Let's say I said pizza was terrible, burnt crust, delivered over an hour. Then I got a comment from the owner. We're sorry to hear that. We're sorry it took so long. We've been understaffed due to the pandemic, and we apologize. Please come back. We'll give you 10% or something off your next order. You can do a gift to get, or you cannot do a gift to get. But responding to those things are going to start to help your credibility factor. And then 92%, of course, they all read these online reviews. Everyone's doing it. So, and it sways decisions. So there are a lot of review sites available. Some of them are just generic ones like Google, Facebook. Some of them are more specific to who you are in the industry. Let's take health grades, for example. If you're in the health industry, or house, let's say you're a contractor, or Zillow. Depending on who you are in the market space, you're going to want to have the standard ones like Google, Yelp, etc. But you're also going to want to have some of the other ones like House, or wherever you are in the market space. OpenTable, if you're a pizzeria, for example. Now, Glassdoor is another one, and I will mention that. So you get a lot of your previous employees. I do see that a lot of times they're mostly, you get a lot more negativity on there. So being able to foster that and own that culture internally is going to be vital. That is a part of your brand. I did say in the beginning, your internal culture is going to help you. It's going to help your team. It's going to make everyone feel like they're part of a larger operation, like they're part of something, they're part of success. So, and then that's going to trickle down towards getting great reviews internally. So you want to make sure you're dominating, you own all your review platforms that you possibly could. It's going to be important for you. Now, negative reviews, as I said, you always want to respond to these negative reviews here, and you want to respond to them professionally. You don't want to say anything crazy. You don't want to have an excuse. You don't want to do any of that. When you have the review, you just want to be very direct and to the point about what the issue might be. A lot of times with staffing nowadays, it's COVID related. People are having a hard time across the board finding employees. Something I see with all my clients, regardless of their space. but you also you also want to offer something, or offer up some kind of goodwill or good gesture. It looks good when other people are reviewing that. And moving forward, then you want to start to foster good reviews. The 9 times out of 10, someone's going to leave a review if they have a negative experience. They're not going to do it if they have a positive one. It's just something I've seen over time. When you have the positive experience, you enjoy your pizza, you move on with your life. If you have a negative experience, you're angry. That's going to carry throughout. You're more you're probably you're more inclined to probably leave a negative review, and let the world know how bad it was. Now, when there's a positive experience with a consumer, that's a good time to maybe send out a nurture email that said, "Hey, thank you for shopping at my store. Please leave a positive review here. It will help me out greatly." And then you leave a little story like that, and you leave a link to whatever review site you want to leave one on. There's also a platform that we use internally here for some of our clientele, where we could take all the review sites, populate them onto one landing page, and then kind of filter out if they're below 4 stars, right? So it is something that can be done. But once a negative review is put on there, it's very hard to get that off unless it's done with malicious intent. Let's say it's a former employee or a competitor going on and leaving some bad Google review that they've never really actually been a part of. They're just trying to make you look bad. There's ways to get those off. They're not always successful, but it can be worked on, something that can be done. The other thing to say too, and I do have some clients who do this, is we work on their SEO strategy. So Facebook, Glassdoor, all those things will naturally rank for your brand terms, right? Whenever I Google Frank's Pizzeria, naturally, when I Google Frank's Pizzeria, Glassdoor might show up because it's Glassdoor and you have really great domain authority. We're going to talk about some of those SEO ins and outs in a meeting in a couple weeks, but they have a strong site, so they're going to rank on the first page of Google. It's something I'm going to see, and if they're all 2 stars, it's something I'm going to see in search automatically. We could do things on your site through SEO strategy to push some of that stuff down over time, but it's a dogfight. Your best bet is to start now and to start fostering great reviews now. Big part of your brand ecosystem. So big missed opportunity I see a lot with small business, but it's something that you should keep an eye on. Now, of course, positive reviews, we talked about using emails for nurture. There are a couple of other things you could do. There's text communications. If you have a CRM that has a mobile app, like let's say you own a fitness facility and you're using MindBody as your CRM, they have a mobile app where you could do push notifications. If you have a push notification, your members all have the app. You can use that stuff for retention purposes. So any way you could possibly garner a good review, try to. At the POS, the point of sale, let's say you're ringing up the pizza, you have a little sign that says with a QR code that they scan, leave us a review right now and show us that review, and we'll give you a free garlic naan or something, or free soda. Sometimes that's that give to get stuff, just gives urgency to the consumer and helps them leave that review. And that review is worth more than that can of soda, I promise you that. Now, Google My Business profile, and there's other profiles as well, but the Google My Business profile is one of the most important. Most search, Google, of course, is the top search engine. I think it's like 94% of all search is done through Google. Number 2 is actually YouTube. It's its own search engine in its own right, but it's also owned by Google. So Google dominates search results, right? There's a reason why we optimize to Google. We do MSN, Bing, and a couple others as well, but Google is the gorilla in the room here. So you want to create your Google My Business profile. Essentially, you'd visit business.google.com. You'd find your company on the map. You'd request ownership of it. There's some things you have to fill out. They'll send you a postcard in the mail. There's some optimization that gets done on the back end of the Google My Business profile that you need an SEO specialist to really handle. But setting this up will help you own those reviews. You see here, Long Island SEO, active web group, we have 4.8 stars and 31 reviews. I'm sure it's more now. This was taken a little bit ago. But all those reviews, those were fostered and nurtured over time. They weren't something someone just clicked on and went. So you have to really nurture those reviews, and you have to take ownership of your profile in order to start doing that. And that's the brand presentation here. I know there's a lot to digest from a visual standpoint, and I know this might also appear to be a little bit elementary to some people. This is the first of this presentation. From here on out, we're going to start to really walk and run. things are going to get a little more complex, and they build upon each other. So next week when we talk about in our next session, I'm going to call back to some of these elements here, and I'm not going to explain them as in depth. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I'd love to hear.
The first one was from Natalie.
Okay, and I see him here. Okay, so I was wondering if you could take a look at our logo. Absolutely. So you did. I see you had a graphic designer do it. Not all. I started my career as an art director before I switched to more ROI marketing. You know, over the years, I found a lot of clientele had a lot of needs, and they were getting I guess the word is bamboozled. You know, there's no two marketing agencies, no two graphic designers are created equally, of course. You know, it's the same as if you were to get your car fixed. You know, auto mechanics not all are created equal. So with that being said, there are some designers who don't really know the rules or don't have formal education. So I could absolutely take a look and see if there's a way to, you know, make it a little bit more professional and more concise without reinventing the wheel. In the fourth lecture we're going to have, I'm going to go over analytics. It's probably my favorite presentation that I'm going to give, of course, as an ROI marketer. We're going to start to talk about how to really look at these metrics, how to ascertain and understand them. Because as I said, a lot of people, a lot of businesses, they'll work with an internal marketer that they hired, or they'll work with somebody, and again, they get bamboozled a lot. Not everyone's created equul. So I want to show you analytics. I want to show you guys what to look for, what metrics to look at, and what numbers to think and consider. So that's going to be a fun presentation. So please stick around until then. But also, if you have any questions then, such as these in that one, I'll gladly look at that as well. So it'll be good roundtable discussion. Okay, let me see. Should my logo clearly state what my business does? Yes and no. And I know that's a little contrite. Yes, it should. Yes, it should. I do see times where things are playful, but it depends on the business. You'll see a lot as a digital marketer working for digital marketing agencies. I work for the best one of all time, Active Web Group. But there are others out there like Mothership and things. They don't tell you who they are or what they're about, right? So there are unique cases where that's can be done, right? But that's a marketing company. If you are a pizzeria, you want to put the word pizza in your logo or your brand mark. That could be in your tagline. Serving great slices since 1974. So you could be creative in that approach. Of course, if your name's Mama's, I'm gonna assume you're some kind of Italian restaurant anyway. But I would say yes. You wanna tell people who you are and what you're about in your logo, your brand name, or your tagline. The tagline, don't forget that. That's an important element. Okay, number 3. My business name is Elder Friends Concierge Service. It's not an e-commerce business, okay? How applicable is what Frank is saying relatable to senior population? Okay, it is important. And the reason why, forgive me, I'm just getting over being a little under the weather, so so I'm still a little bit of a cold. But it is vital. The reason why it's vital to a senior population is because of communication, right? Some of these people they might not be able to visually see things as well, right? As well as somebody who's a lot younger, a younger audience. They also might not be as hip or in tune to what's going on in design and all this stuff. So less is more. You want to clearly communicate. I underlines the word, highlight the word communicate. We're communicating here. You have to find out how to communicate visually to that audience, that population. A lot of that is going to be clear, concise design. Like you have a logo, you have a brand mark. That logo and that brand mark needs to coherently say what you do and who you are, right? If you do something in the hospital, the healthcare arena, you want your little logo mark to say that. Maybe it's a little nurse's hat or something, and then it says what it does. And then your tagline clearly outlines who you are, what you're for, what you're about. You want to be clear and concise in that regard, especially when you're dealing with a population who might not, you know, be as in tune with what's going on in modern design, etc. I'm building a consulting business. Do you have any tips, tricks for folks in the professional service industry? Oh, do I? Yes. So B2B is a little bit fickle in its approach. It's less fun. So you know, I'm not selling shirts and hats. I'm not a lifestyle brand. I'm communicating, I'm shaking hands, I'm giving out business cards, I'm going to networking events, I'm doing that sort of stuff. I'm on LinkedIn, which we'll talk about. But when we're talking about that, communication again is going to be clear key here. Less more so than when I was discussing with the senior problem. When I say I'm a digital marketer, I always say I'm a problem solver. We solve problems at the end of the day, right? So with that in mind, you're going to want to speak clearer than you would with the senior population, because a lot of times you're dealing with a C-suite executive or a decision maker or an assistant of a decision maker. They don't have a lot of time. They quickly want to digest your email blast, understand who you are, what you're about, what your message is, what you're doing in like as few words as possible, and then move on, right? If you have paragraphs and paragraphs of copy, no one's reading that, right? If your headlines has a lot of salesy stuff, no one's going to click on that. So you want to be clear in your communication. You want to boil down what your message is to the least amount of words or elements as possible. There are certain buzzwords that might find you in a spam inbox, like the word sale and things like that. So there are things to look out for and not do. Also, when you have, I'm using the email marketing example because you should be sending out nurture pieces to your potential clientele. If you're not, big missed opportunity. We'll talk about that. That's a line item in a meeting coming up. But when you're doing that, you want to have a very short message. You don't want to have something that's like a 2,000 long pixel email that has lines and lines of things. No, again, no one's going to read that. You want to quickly convey your message to the potential decision maker or buyer. Essentially what's called an elevator pitch. So you're going up the elevator, you want to say who you are, what you're about, what you need in less than 30 seconds as you're going up that elevator, right? You got the decision maker right here. He's the CEO. He's headed up to his office. So that's the first thing you need to do. Okay, moving forward here. We're on the negative reviews. I wholly agree with responding to negative reviews, but a lot of times it seems like boilerplate, insincere, and automatic responses. Agreed. It's tough to be organic when responding to negative reviews. Luckily, I don't have any to date. Well, congratulations. But as you do more business and as you get out there, I'm sure you're killing it right now. But oh, they're waiting. Everyone always has something negative to say. But reading others' responses seems cold and impersonal. I agree. Thank you. This is incredible information, and I appreciate that. Yeah, the next sessions we're going to start to really climb up the mountain here. You must respond to them. Some of them are going to be boilerplate. Thank you. I'm sorry you had a bad experience, Tom. There's some of them are going to be like that. But the more personal you could get, and it's really easy. It's as simple as like when you send a follow-up email to somebody and you pull out. We all know this as business people. You pull out a little line or something you had a great experience with. Like I just met Scott Ford, the president and founder of Active Web Group, and I want a job there because it's the best company in the world. I'm going to send him a follow-up email, and I'm gonna remember something that we said in our meeting, so he remembers me. Scott said he's got a really cool Chihuahua at home, and I'm gonna say, oh man, when I was a kid, my grandma had a Chihuahua. It was great that you said that. So being able to pull something out from their experience that they had in that previous paragraph, like they had the mushroom pizza, and they said the mushrooms were just soggy, and then you say, oh, I'm sorry, the mushroom pizza was terrible. That turns it from being boilerplate to not. It becomes more personal. So pull personal things out from what they've said and spit it back out them. Okay, now we're at bad review. For the restaurant, okay, how to respond and if you're in the restaurant industry, we have a lot to discuss. So let's become friends. How to respond to a review that says food badly cooked and service was bad. Yeah, and you're gonna get that, and that's why I said hats off to you, because these are some of the worst reviews in one of the toughest spaces to work in right now. So I certainly feel for you. It's a tricky one. The good news is you do have the opportunity to provide them a reason to come back, right? As I said, I know the pizza was terrible. Come back, save 5% or something. It's something silly. Say when you get here, Tell the waitress that about me, and I will come out and I'll personally, give you something or do something. So you have that opportunity to right that wrong, right, and do that. And it might cost you a couple dollars, but there is an opportunity there. Now, when somebody leaves a negative review, right, on Google, for example, they do have the opportunity to go back and then make it positive again. Go back and say, I revisited, they made it right, and they update how many stars it is, right? So keep that in mind too. They can go backwards. We've actually done that before. That's actually, there was we had a misunderstanding with something, a very small business. We worked with them to make sure that they were 100% happy. And then, we got a great return review for it. So there's always an opportunity to fix something. There's always, the door is always open to go and fix it. You just have to work with them to try to get it done. Okay, where are we at? Okay. Is it better to have a brand logo similar to the rest of your industry, or is it okay to stray? That's another one. I like the idea of being different and unique, but within reason. As I said, the doctor's office is a good example. I don't make the logo orange and with a splatter looking like Nickelodeon. I mean, if you're a pediatrician, maybe you get away with it, but kind of not really, because who's your target audience? It's not the kid, it's the mom. So know your target audience first and foremost, and then that will tell you. Don't look at your competition, look at your audience. If you're, you're a C-suite executive, you work in the computing arena. You're looking for other people who might want to get networking solutions into their business, right? The digital network, for plugging in computers and stuff like that. If you're doing that, you're not going to want to make it with all these crazy colors and things. So knowing your audience is going to be vital, and that's going to tell you what to do, not your competition. When creating a logo for a product, where you want to be able to put a permanent stamp or tag on your product. Permanent stamp or tag. Okay, so we're talking like a shirt with like an embroidery tag in the back or something. What are some tips for abbreviating or making logos legible and ultimately searching? Should someone pick it up and want to know where it came from? I make ceramics and sometimes have limited space. Okay, but the logo, yeah, I understand that, Nick. So you have your pottery piece, right? There's not a lot of space. You don't want to mess up the pottery piece itself with some kind of logo. I mean, I have a couple pieces of pottery in my home. A lot of times I'll see like a maker's mark on the back side where the stand is, or I'll see it on the inside. For you, it's going to be about the vehicle or packaging which it sits in, right? So that's where your opportunity to really put a brand or a logo is. If you have just like a little tag that you could rip off, or it's like on chicken wire and it comes off of a thing, that's where you're going to put your real logo mark. You could have an ancillary stamp mark that has the manufacturer information on it that would go on the back side or the inside of the piece. I think for you to have two different logo sets for that would be ideal. Okay, lots of questions. I love it. What elements in terms of color, fonts, etc., do you think would be appropriate for the tour and tourist industry? That's a very, very complex question there. So in terms of color, you're traveling the world. Look at the world, blue and green. Fonts. For me, you're going to deal with tourists. So just thinking about it, you want to be clean and concise. So serif typeface, as I said, they can be a little trickier to read. So you want a sans serif, something without brackets or feet, something clean, a Futura or a Helvetica, something that feels modern, something that I could read if I only speak Spanish, but I know a little bit of English, right? Because you're dealing with citizens of the world here, so you want to be able to communicate to all walks of life. So for you, being clean and concise is going to be vital. And I keep saying clean and concise, but again, as I said, we're communicating here. We're not selling Mona Lisas. Okay, should we be able to design our own logo by the end of the 4 sessions? No, yes and no. So the goal here of these 4 sessions, as I said, I get a lot of clientele that comes to me and they're, my star-crossed lover, where they were in a previous relationship with another agency, or they hired somebody that they got sold a bill of goods, they don't know what they're doing, and they're very jaded. There is success out there. So what I'm doing here is I'm educating you guys as business owners on what to look for in a good logo, like we talked about with the person earlier who got a logo, but it's not the greatest. What to look for a good logo. We're going to talk about websites. Why no 2 websites are created equal. What to look for in a good website that's going to convert views or visits into sales or clients, right? So you know what to look for. I'm not expecting after that session for you guys to become master web developers, right? My web development team took 20 plus years to become experts at that. And every day they're learning something new. It's what we do in our business. But what I want you to do is I want you to be able to take the terms, the tools, and the things that you should be looking for, right? Imagine you're buying a car. What do you look for in a good used car? I want to teach you what to look for in a good used car, what to look for in a website. The same is going to be true for SEO and pay-per-click and all those vehicles that we're going to use for digital marketing strategy. I don't want you to just hear big words and think you're getting a good service. I want you to, regardless of what you do with your life, I want you to be able to take those things, be able to understand what's being done and why they're being done, get that education, and if it's something you might want to go down a rabbit hole of figuring it out, you can. However, if you're going to find somebody who does those things, you know what to look for. And then we're going to look at the analytics, which again, my favorite possible thing we can do. So you won't be, you're not going to be thinking of a graphic designer. You're not going to be Paul Rand by the end of this, guy who made the IBM logo, but you will be, you will be inept in knowing what to look for in good design ethos. And if you want to take a stab at drawing something for a potential designer to execute, you could do that. Okay, when looking at my logo, it's very colorful and wordy. Without changing it too much, how do I scale it down and be more concise? Okay, so how do I get it to be more representative of who I am and what I offer? It kind of seems like you don't really like your logo mark and what you're doing. First of all, without changing it too much, how do I scale it down and be more concise? The first thing you need to do is you need to pass it around. You need to say, what do I do? Tell me what I do. Who am I? And if they can't really tell you what you do, you probably need to retool your entire vision here, your entire strategy. If it's something you're just worried about colors, you could pare those down to really only be 2 or 3. Like I said, when we start to develop and design logos, they're done in grayscale, blacks and whites. This way we visually understand, what's popping out, what's not, what's important, what's not. If I can't design a little lion masthead in black and white, it's gonna look like garbage when I add yellows and colors to it, right? So you want to make sure it looks good in grayscale. Once it looks good in grayscale and it communicates well, communicates is the key word. Once it communicates well, from there you'll be off to the races and adding things to it. Adding things to your wardrobe. You put your shirt and pants on, and then from there you put your necklace and jewelry on, right? So get the shirt and pants on, and then put the jewelry on. Is going to be a service to communities. Okay, eventually I intend to expand to offer other services, but at the beginning, it is offering recovery services available to a person waiting for treatment services. Okay, it was suggested to me to get a small web page for explain. I'm not going to read the rest of that because I completely agree. I read the words. Do you agree? Yes, you need a web presence. Whether it's a couple pages, whether it's 100 pages, you don't need 100 pages, but you need a web presence. Essentially, you're servicing communities. People are going to go and try to find you online and read about you. You want to be available to be read. You want to be professional in the modern world, which means you need a website. So again, you should have a website. It should have a homepage, maybe a couple ancillary pages. Once we start to get to talk about SEO and things like that, then something's gonna spark in you and say, oh, I should get a blog where I'm writing about the communities which I'm servicing, and then I could use those and get inserts in like PR or editorial places and things like that. I could send an email newsletter that links back to my website. I have reasons to post on social media. Everything kind of works 360 as a vehicle, but another meeting, please attend. But I do agree, you need to have a website. Do you think logo generators are useful? No, absolutely not. If you're serious about being a brand, you want to create your own stuff. Also, a lot of these tools that are out there, which we didn't get into, some of them have right restrictions. So you could use them for your own personal use. You could put them, if you're in college, you could use them for your presentation, but you can't go and start to put that on the side of a bottle and sell energy drinks because you're going to get sued. So knowing what the rights are, this becomes a problem with people just going in Google and finding an image and pulling it off. People get cease and desists all the time. There's actually companies out there that just do that. They put images out there and then they send you a cease and desist because they're crawling the site looking for the metadata of that image. So don't do that. You can use that to get ideas though. You can absolutely use that to get ideas, but be original, be unique, and be you. When putting a name as a website in a logo, how many different fonts should I use? 1 or 2. And when I say 1 or 2, I mean a family. So if I have Helvetica, I'm using bold and I'm using light. So light is the tagline, bold is the name of my word. I'm Lion Nutrition, and that's bold. And then supplements for adults, that's in that thin Helvetica. So I'm using one family, I'm using 2 different weights. Less is more, use less. Don't use 5 different typefaces, no need for that. It's gonna get confusing and clunky and gross. Less is more, use less. And that's it, I don't see any more
Frank, you
questions.
cruise. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, please feel free to email me. I put my email in the chat, and I know you're going to send it as well, Renee. Visit our website, activewebgroup.com. You can put a comment in one of the many forums we have, one of the CTAs or conversion points, which we're going to talk about. Feel free to. I'm always around to ask questions and get my brain picked. You know, of course, we do it all. So anything you have, please let us know.
Thank you. I so appreciate it. And so many thanks rolling in for you and your group and for that opportunity. Scott, did you want to mention anything before we shut down that we might have forgotten?
Wanted to thank you. This was really nicely done. Frank, thank you for your time. Thank you very much for having us.
Absolutely. Hope everyone has a great day. Frank, thank you so much for presenting, and we will see everybody next week, Tuesday at 10. Take care.